Greetings, fellow DC superfans. Tiki here.
And BlueDragonFive.
After getting educated in all things DCAU Batman, I've decided it's time to embark on a journey to the Arctic to learn about Superman, the animated series. Aiding me along the way is Blue Dragon 5.
That's right, folks. Like Jarrell, I'm serving as Tiki's pre-recorded guide through Superman the Animated Series, with the goal of shedding light and showing Tiki the way to better understand the history of the last son of Krypton.
Let's fly to the Fortress of Recaps and talk The Last Son of Krypton, Part 1.
Yeah.
All right, so Dragon, is all of your stuff going to be pre-recorded throughout this entire podcast series? Is this how it works?
I've anticipated everything.
Am I just talking with a series of recordings of you?
Yes, I've anticipated everything you were ever going to ask me, Tiki, and this is just my response to it. It's artificial.
Excellent. AI has really come a long way, folks. It's crazy.
Well, it also destroyed Krypton, as we're going to get into.
That too. Yeah. All right. So yeah, Dragon, I guess my thoughts on this episode, I think it's a fine premiere. I honestly think my only reservation, it's a really good interpretation of this story. That being said, we've seen this story so many times. I will say the Brainiac element of it is definitely the highlight for me, for sure. Obviously, we have Corey Burden doing some fantastic voice work, as well as Tony Jay, another big Disney alum, in another kind of pivotal supporting role. So that's all cool. I don't know, Dragon, this episode, it does a serviceable enough job showcasing the destruction of Krypton. And like I said, I do think the highlight here is definitely the Brainiac stuff, which I can only assume is going to come back in the future of the series. We can only assume as much. But that's kind of one of the fun things here. If you guys don't know, I'm sure most of you watching here know, but Dragon and we did the animated Batcave, where the whole point of that show was me. I was very unfamiliar with Batman, the animated series. Basically, outside of like Doug Walker's top 11 Batman, the animated series episodes. That's pretty much, by and large, what my extent of the knowledge of the show was. And so it was a really fun kind of learning process. And in that way, Dragon, I definitely think that this is going to be fun as well. In terms of like, okay, Brainiac, I know they're setting up something big. Brainiac is obviously a big Superman villain, and it's kind of interesting here that, like, by all intents and purposes, Brainiac is essentially serving the role that would have gone to Zod in this story. So definitely some interesting takeaways. I'm not like jumping up and down. This isn't like the best Superman story I've ever seen or anything, but it's an interesting start, and it's a bold start to, obviously I'm sure we'll see Clark, actual like Clark Kent, not Kal-El. We get a little bit of baby Kal-El in this episode, but I'm sure we'll see Clark next episode. But it is a bold start to start an episode of Superman the Animated Series with an episode that features not a singular frame of Superman if you don't count the intro. So yeah, interested to talk this through for sure.
All right, let me give you a little background.
Okay,
so this was directed by the great and powerful Dan Reba, the Dan Scanlon of the DCAU, as we like to refer to him as.
The Dan Club.
Yeah.
I got your package, Dan.
Odenkirk's cameo in the episode. So, Dan Reba, of course. Now, of course, we have like a whole animated Batcave under our belt, so there should be some familiarity with these names if we've imbued anything here. But
yes, I mean, anything except for who Dick Grayson is. I'm still a little confused on that.
Okay, Tiki, don't panic. Okay, so Dick Grayson is DG. Okay.
Yep.
All right. Anyway, so Dan Reba, he was the director on Zatanna, the big Zatanna Batman animated series. Did the Riddler's Reform, one of my favorite Riddler episodes of all time from Batman animated series, and a few others I'm going to save for a later time. But yeah, our writer, We had a duo of writers on this. The best you could have. Again, this is a pilot, so essentially we have to get our best and brightest on here, and basically our guys behind the series Bible of the show. We have Alan Burnett, of course, the great and powerful Alan Burnett, who's always been around for these, pretty much for the entirety of the DCAU, and very least for Batman. He's been around since in kind of DC with animation for probably the longest career in animation history. He's been around. So
Um,
he directed he wrote the Two-Face episode of Batman the Animated Series. Did did Rebirth from Batman Beyond, and also to give you just kind of, he's very much the go-to guy for like the launch episode. Did Aftershock from Static Shock.
yeah, yeah, for sure, for sure.
So joining him, Paul Dini. It's a Dini episode, Tiki.
Yeah, for sure.
Bring on the Dini.
And it definitely feels that way. Like I said, I think all the most interesting parts of this episode, the parts that kind of like aren't just playing the last son of Krypton story straight, do definitely feel very Dini-esque. The Brainiac stuff in particular.
Of course, Dini, need I say it, but just to give you some context, again, you get Rebirth, you get Heart of Ice, and of course, Mask of the Phantasm.
Mm-hmm.
So our studio worked on this. So to give you some context on the studio here, so the studio worked on this was Coco with a side of Dong Yang.
Oh boy, our familiar combination.
Now here's something we want to note, Tegan. This is important just for the history of it all, because we can only mention from the periphery with Batman the Animated Series, and then it just kind of became a running gag ultimately. But
Uh-huh.
so the first time, to my knowledge, the first time we had Coco and Dong Yang, but specifically Coco, was Sub-Zero. You know, the Batman Sub-Zero, the animated Mr. Freeze movie.
Sure, sure.
But Superman the Animated Series, of course, before we're saying Coco and Dong Yang pretty much throughout the large majority, with very, very few exceptions of Batman Beyond, because they pretty much did all the animation for Batman Beyond. Before that, they cut their teeth on Superman. Superman was like, this was the first time we really had like regularly Coco and Dong Yang working together. So Coco was very much kind of getting its workout with Superman before we get to kind of like, every episode being Batman Beyond is like the house studio.
Uh-huh.
So it was the beginning for them. All right, let's see. After post Sub-Zero. So Batman the Animated. So I'm going to break this up a little bit because we had kind of 3 episodes to really kind of unfurl this with. So
I didn't know there was a part 3. I knew I kind of knew because Code Geass said so, but before Code Geass said something, I did not know there was a part 3. I just knew there was a part 2.
So I'm going to weave this a little bit here, but just to give you like the origins of the show, because we're on episode 1.
Uh-huh.
So Batman the Animated Series, the original Batman the Animated Series, the Golden Years, it was at an end, and it was kind of that now what kind of moment, that bloat the fish kind of moment from Nemo, if you will. Now what?
Right.
Bruce Timm was always hesitant to do Superman, because that was obviously the logical, why don't you do Superman next? Because he did such a great job with Batman. Of course, Batman has some roots in Fleischer Superman, so it's the logical conclusion. Why not do Superman next, you guys?
Uh-huh.
He wanted to avoid because it was very much the obvious move. And for 2 reasons. One, it was the obvious move. And secondly, unlike Batman the Animated Series, Bruce Timm didn't have like a clear vision for Superman. It was very much they would have to really figure it out from the ground versus like, okay, here's what we would love to see from Batman animation, which basically Gene McCurdy allotted them the opportunity to do. After the success of Tiny Toons, essentially how Batman Animated Series came about. So we don't quite have like guys like with around the block with ideas for Batman. This is like, well, Superman collectively is a beloved character. Honestly, the crew that worked on this, they really loved George Reeves' Superman. That was very much that was their equivalent to Adam West growing up. That was their Superman.
I mean, that makes sense. Yeah, that's an apt comparison.
So instead, what Bruce Timm did, so instead of like just going into Superman, he did Freakazoid. Well, he did the beginnings of Freakazoid. So what he did was, Steven Spielberg loved Batman the Animated Series so much. He wanted to get Bruce Timm to do a superhero show with him. So Bruce Timm did the initial designs and basically the premise. He pitched like kind of a very kind of a. Basically, he pitched the Creeper from Batman the Animated Series as kind of a lead star hero, which is basically was the kind of the archetype for Freakazoid. And then basically, Tom Ruger and Paul Rugg, they went a very different direction, more comedic direction with it, and just very much
Of course,
Bruce
yeah.
Timm fell off. You have a few of the kind of the animated series players like Paul Dini and of course Tom Ruger himself. They were on the show, but Bruce Timm, it wasn't really his baby from start to finish, like maybe initially he thought it might be.
Uh-huh.
So again, he did the groundwork and the designs for that show. So he's basically looking for the next project. Kids WB, they were looking to capitalize, presumably on this is like during the early '90s. You have Superman comes into prominence in like I want to say '93, and whenever Lois and Clark, the Adventures of Lois and Clark show is going on. We have the death of Superman, and we have Lois and Clark happening. So Superman's in vogue again, and there's nothing animated with Superman to really kind of represent that.
Sure.
So that was like the big Kids WB, because Batman Adventures started on Fox, and this is when Kids WB begins. This is how we get to like the new Batman Adventures being on Kids WB, which oddly is more violent than it ever was on Fox.
Yes, as we've joked about many times with Batman.
So he gets the call. He gets the call from Jean McCurdy, the woman that built the DCAU. She gets a call from her, and it's like, "Hey, you want to do Superman? How can he refuse the call?" So.
Uh-huh.
So yes, I'm going to save all the Superman specific stuff for part two. But let me just hit you with the mantra and the mandate for the show overall. It was they wanted to do a cool Superman show that wasn't just the best iteration of Superman, just animated Donner Superman. It was kind of the Tim Burton Batman thing. We don't want to just do Burton Batman like animated like GI Joe. We don't want to do that.
Uh-huh.
They wanted to do like not a rip, and they didn't want it. The big mantra of the show is they did not want to do a rip off of Fleischer Superman because it was going to be very easy for them to do that. Obviously, they've shown they could do that with Batman the Animated Series.
Sure.
Which led to all these inventive ideas that kind of pay tribute to Superman's history while doing their own thing.
Like weirdly enough, I feel like Batman the Animated Series is more Fleischer Superman
exactly
than the animated series ever was.
Yeah, and again, it's very kind of intentional to a degree. It's Anyway, so they have the BTAS crew. You had Alan Burnett, Paul Dini, Bruce Timm, Glenn Murakami, who went on to Batman Beyond. And importantly, we introduced James Tucker, who goes on to do Justice League and Batman Brave and the Bold. This is where James Tucker really gets his start in animation with superheroes, really. This is his big break on Superman. So, with the episode specifically, unlike Batman the Animated Series, we tackled the origin. And they made it into an event, because honestly, it was a thing where Batman, they never tackled the origin, in part because it's going to be a real bummer, especially if you start episode one with like the murder of the Waynes. Welcome to
a little bit.
I'm just saying, like, given it wasn't that they had the Fight Network.
You imagine if the whole episode was basically like the first 20 minutes of Batman Begins.
Yeah, if you look
at Batman, falls in the cave. They go to the opera. Joe Chill.
Yeah, if you look at Batman the Animated Series, we got away with talking. Look, it's not that we got away with it. We did mention, and we did thematically, we obviously broached the subject of the death of the Waynes and the Wayne murder, but we did it artfully, and we kind of built to it, and it was always like, through Scarecrow fear toxin or stuff like that is how the Batman hallucinating. That's kind of how we were able to tackle that subject matter. But, it was always like the thing of like doing the origins was kind of passe. It was kind of like, everyone knows the origin. Why bother like spelling it out to people? But Superman was like the superhero. It was like too tempting not to do and put their own spin on, like making an event, which ultimately the marketing people I'm sure really enjoyed because they said, look, initially it started as a 2-parter and then they kind of expanded to a 3-parter. And I suspect the 3-parter was maybe not just Breathing Room, but also home video. They wanted to make it like they released this kind of like World's Finest. World's Finest is a 3-episode special, which is released as a movie on home video. They did the same here. So Superman kind of premiered with an animated movie to an extent. So 3 episodes put together, which we've seen all the time in animation. They take the 3. It's the Atlantis 2 thing. This was kind of like the good version of that.
The good version, yes.
So basically, they dedicated part 1 to Krypton, really let it breathe, and then kind of 2 and 3 just kind of goes from there. So they did absolutely intentionally use the Donner structure because that really works in that movie. It's broken up into 3 sections. Basically, what if we did that as like our opener, and that's the most Donner we're going to put into this thing.
All
right. And also, as Tiki said at the top here, only episode without Superman at all.
That's a bold move, Cotton. Let's see if it pays off for him. That quote is becoming more and more relevant as time goes on.
Well, especially with King of the Hill around the corner.
Oh, God.
Anyway, so I think it's something they can only get away with because of the success of Batman the Animated Series, by the way. Your first episode does not have the character in it really at all. I mean, Kal-El's there, but he's a baby.
Right.
So it was a bold move, to say the least.
All right. So before we dive into it, we will address some comments. Little Blue is saying, well, this is the beginning of a new era for the channel. Eli, just to address a question that you've been posing to me in private, no, we will not be changing the name of the channel. That's something that Dragon and I have been kind of contemplating off air. I don't think it's necessary at this point. I mean, I kind of feel like at this point we're kind of stuck with the identity we have. I don't really think it would make that much difference one way or another. So just so you know, because you are definitely hung up on the whole like new era thing, which I appreciate. I appreciate the enthusiasm. Okay, let's see. Kogia says, I think that the Fortress of Recaps is a great idea for a sequel to the Batman reviews. Thank you, Kogia. Very excited to get into it. He also says, I've seen the opening three-part opening Superman animated series a lot because as a kid I had a tape that combined the three parts into a movie. Oh yeah, as Dragon was establishing. Let's see. Tony J is one of my favorite actors. I love that he got to a voice role in the first episode. Yep, indeed, which we'll get into. Brainiac is one of my favorite Superman villains, and so far Superman the Animated Series and Justice League have been the best adaptation of him, in my opinion. Again, something we'll definitely get into as we go through the episode. And Sonia Pantoja just popping in with a hi. How you doing, Sonia? Hope you're having a good evening. All right, Dragon, let's dive into it.
So, again, just kind of roundabout way here. So the clips. So we open. You'll notice we do not have a fancy opening like we did with Batman. Technically, we don't have like the artful. Like we don't even need to say the name of the show. We just see, it's just you see Batman, the blimps, and everything. The reason we don't have that, we don't have like a version of that with Superman. It's just pretty much like a kind of a clippy opening. Is they ran out of time. They just did not have the time. All they did is the opening. They animated like that end where he pulls the shirt open. He's flying around. That's all they animated. That was new. Everything else was clips from the show because they had no time. However, you're going to appreciate this, and I wanted to get this in here somewhere. So the theme, basically the main, like the opening title theme is the main, like So Shirley Walker, she did the theme, and very much like she did with Elfman's theme on on Batman the Animated Series, she basically took a lot of cues from just kind of the classic. So basically, instead of Elfman, she took it from John Williams. And basically, what she did was, it's really clever. Williams, basically in his Superman theme, he has like the word Superman kind of built into the music. Superman. So that's essentially what Shirley Walker took the same kind of idea, and she just kind of like kind of retrofitted it to kind of like Superman. It's basically Superman over and over again. Superman. If you really listen to it,
Right. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So Jor-El. So Jor-El's voiced by Christopher McDonald. He does a great job, by the way. Jor-El shows up, and he also voiced the future version of Superman from Batman Beyond. They brought back Christopher McDonald. So again, it's the idea the son becomes the father becomes the son literalized.
Nice.
So, he's like, this is a really cool kind of sci-fi, kind of like it's kind of a really cool sci-fi take on the scientist, taking readings of the planet. He's going to the icy regions of Krypton, which is kind of a foreshadow to the Fortress of Solitude. He's attacked by this kind of Schloth, or it's like a Shaggoth, and this thing's like it's kind of like a Lovecraftian alien monster thing that's attacking them and everything.
I mean, I will say, just like stylistically, and Snyder, the Krypton stuff with Man of Steel, not counting anything from the Krypton show, which I haven't seen. I don't know how that bleeds into it, but the first act or so, the first 20 minutes of Man of Steel, that's always been some of the. I mean, I generally speaking kind of hate Zack Snyder's Superman. I don't hate Henry Cavill. I just hate the writing of Zack Snyder's Superman. Don't kill me. I'm sorry. But, generally speaking, though, that stuff was some of the strongest elements of Man of Steel. And I do think that there are some elements that Snyder might have borrowed here, specifically some of the iconography of Krypton, some of the creature designs.
Oh, for sure. I mean, this definitely has Man of Steel vibes, and it does make me wonder if, the animated series was always the kind of the underrated thing where not a lot of people, we're going to get to the big idea that did carry over from this episode. This episode did have a lot of ripples with Superman and the mythology when we go to Krypton, but this was the first, I mean, just to kind of jump to a little bit, I mean, just in talking about Krypton. So James Tucker, again, this is first time in the the kind of the DC play box here in the playground. And he is tasked with like, hey, it's your first job in animation. You're going to design Krypton, which basically is like you can't make it like the Donner Superman because Bruce Timm fundamentally he wanted to avoid. He always had gripes with Krypton in the Donner movie, where basically he felt it was too cold and kind of sterile, and it wasn't really a warm environment that you would miss when it was gone. That was Bruce Timm's kind of statement of like, what's Superman really missing if it's just they're very much kind of robotic, very kind of like people that brought this on themselves kind of a thing,
Sure.
So basically, James Tucker was tasked with okay, the challenge is it's a location we by definition are not going to spend a lot of time at.
Right.
But you got to design it. You got to put the legwork in. You got to make it different than traditionally the very simple crystal look, and there's got to be a world building there. And it's so again, if you look at it like Krypton, it's very much kind of a utopia. It's like an achieved utopia through technology that basically is like, if you really look at it, it's like natural environments that are integrated with kind of like the pinnacle of like kind of sci-fi Jetsons technology. So it's kind of a fusion of it's like what if we could advance, but also we're not paving over and destroying like the environment. It's kind of a Miyazaki vibe to it if you really kind of
A little bit. It does have a little bit of that. Yeah, for sure.
Now, obviously, currently we have a very anime-inspired Superman, but believe it or not, because of, I mean, maybe a little intentionally from the experience on Batman, because they brought a lot of experience with Batman onward. But based on the fact we have a lot of overseas animation, there are anime and just kind of Japanese kind of influences on Superman here and there, and especially with like his rocket later on. So there's always a lot of like kind of anime touches on Superman before we went full anime with My Adventures of Superman. So this is kind of the root of it. One could argue. Anyway, so
generally speaking, I think Superman, like if you look at just one of the big genesis points of anime with fucking Dragon Ball, dude. Like, what is Dragon Ball but a Superman story?
Well, yeah, that's basically Toriyama's love letter to Superman.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, at least Dragon Ball Z, yeah.
Yeah, sure.
All right, let's see. So let's talk. So Alan Burnett. So his big contribution to honestly to the whole world of Superman, but for this show and this episode specifically was he was the guy who pitched Brainiac as kind of the AI computer on Krypton. That was his big pitch. So in the comics, Brainiac.
No, I basically know nothing about Brainiac Dragon. Like I've obviously heard the name, and I'm obviously working my way through My Adventures with Superman season 2. I'm about halfway through. I'm going through it slowly. I'm kind of savoring it. Kind of, like making the Superman love go as far as it can this month. But outside of what I've seen from that show, I really don't know anything about Brainiac. So this is kind of but from what I understand about Brainiac, this is definitely not the norm for the character, right?
No, this was like an innovation. This was like a big moment. This was the first time they ever did this. So Alan Burnett had a really good idea that basically was so good. It has like been. It's kind of like This is like I don't know. It's kind of the closest equivalent we have. This is basically Superman's equivalent to Heart of Ice from Mr. Freeze. It was like a big.
Okay.
It was a big reinvention that really took and really basically from going forward. They really, with few exceptions, they really basically unless you go really purist with it, which. Bruce Timm had hesitations when Alan Burnett pitched this because, deep cut Superman guy. He was like, well, he comes from like the planet Kolu. He's like he's a biological organism who's basically turned into technology and yada, yada. And it was like a fear of like, well, this is like it's never been done before. But Alan Burnett made really good points here that just the idea from the show that Krypton being as advanced a society as it is could conceivably create Brainiac and basically kind of like the classic kind of like in a post Terminator 2 world. It's like basically it's Skynet on Krypton. Basically they devise like the
that's pretty much the gist I got. Just the whole idea of like that you can't rely too much on technology. I must say, Dragon, an idea that's just how is that even fucking relevant to what we're going through today at all, Dragon? I mean, Jesus Christ, did the writers just not foresee that we wouldn't be thinking about that at all?
Yeah. So it was a really solid idea that you basically
acknowledge my sarcasm.
Yeah.
No, seriously, it is pretty trippy how ahead of its time it is, though.
No, for sure it is. It's a very relevant idea. That's what I'm saying. It was ahead
Yeah,
of its
yeah,
time and
yeah.
sadly, predictive of the times.
Uh-huh.
But yeah, so it's basically what led to Basically, what if Brainiac was created by Krypton? That's ultimately what led to Krypton's downfall. But again, Krypton's hubris being the advancement and the complacency of the technology, which is kind of like the battle between Jor-El and Brainiac is the human mind essentially. I know it's it's Kryptonian mind, but just go with me, he's humanoid. The human mind versus the technological mind, and I love the idea that Jor-El and Brainiac essentially are reluctant co-workers and kind of rivals. Really, like Jor-El hates Brainiac because Brainiac's fighting him again. It's HAL 9000 thing, which essentially was the idea. Like, what if Brainiac? It's less Skynet, more like what if Brainiac was
What if
HAL
HAL
9000?
9000 was basically just like an obnoxious coworker?
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah.
Which is a
So
great idea.
also, by the way, there's a lot of Jack Kirby influence. Bruce Timm, huge from the Fantastic Four onward, even before then. He always loved Jack Kirby. So there's a lot of Jack Kirby influence in the show, which you're really going to see big time in season 3. I'll say that much.
Oh yeah.
But even this early on, Brainiac, his construction, the three circles, obviously it's a classic Brainiac thing, but making it like the definitive like pattern on the character. And every time we see him on the screen, behind the little 3 dot pattern, Kirby dots. Jack
Uh-huh.
Kirby
Uh-huh.
Craggle, the Kirby Craggle Kirby dot pattern. So Corey Burton, flawless as Brainiac. So easily to me, definitive take on Brainiac. It's just he's got the cold, emotionless kind of robot. He kind of sounds like something from the Disney parks, which is even cooler.
Yes, yes, totally, totally.
So what if the Disney parks tried to kill you, kind of a thing. Yep. Let's see. So it's again, what if AI today, could talk back and give you sass and judge you? That's essentially what Brainiac is.
Fucking terrifying.
Yep. Like I said, Jor-El point being, he went out to the far reaches of Krypton, basically around like where he can get close to the planet's core, and he took some readings. And apparently, I kind of forgot about these subtle details. It took like 5 months, and he kind of took his family with him in like this floating kind of thing,
Uh-huh.
this floating skiff thing. And it's been a 5 month excursion to get all these readings, and he's conducted his research, and he's going back to Krypton to present his findings. So let's talk about the House of El. So we got Jor-El, we got Laura. I like how we kind of adopted like Superman's looks are, he basically looks like Jor-El, but we have the spit curl from the mother. So that's kind of how you get Superman's appearance.
Right, right, right.
You know, I really, on the rewatch, Tiki, it's been ages since I've gone back to like the first episode of Superman the Animated Series. I love the heroic nature of Jor-El, where he is doing everything he can to save his people and save his planet.
I mean,
Despite,
like one of the cool things about this episode is that obviously we don't get Superman proper, but Jor-El is in some ways like definitely like kind of like you see where he gets it from, like
yeah,
kind of like heroic, almost Boy Scout-esque quality to him.
yeah, just seeing like the DNA of Superman literally just kind of at play here. This is where in his core, he's going to become a man like Jor-El, who's a really. Again, I love that Bruce Timm strive to really make Jor-El and Krypton very likable and very much like a really compelling story that you get a sense of like what Superman really lost, with his connection to his parents.
Totally, totally.
Which again, complete distance to kind of a similarity, but also a big kind of divide between him and Batman. Where Batman obviously he had 8 years with his parents, and very much that made the loss all the more traumatic. Where Superman kind of has like it's kind of more of a very much like learning like, oh God, like all these questions about himself and everything, and.
And then of course James Gunn's Superman kind of like throws an extra wrinkle at that. So there's a lot of interesting things you can do with that story.
Absolutely.
I do think it's interesting though, kind of like having such an idealistic version of the House of El, if you will, after that movie. It just kind of goes to show how many different, like I said, how many different interpretations of the character and of the lore you can kind of weave together. It's really interesting.
Admittedly, as looking back on this again, this might be the most tender and affectionate we've ever seen. Like, again, we take honestly, it's one of the times we've seen. It's one of the
Honestly, like
examples.
just based on the dialogue itself, this is like the one time that Jor-El isn't like talking like a fucking robot.
Well, to be fair, a lot of that is like it's always him actually as a robot, like telling him about Krypton. Though.
Okay, yes, I know, I realize that, but still, but basically what I'm saying is that it's nice to have, like seeing Jor-El and Laura have have banter. You
Yeah,
don't
they have.
really see that.
They're well. It's just crazy because this is kind of like the most we ever see, not counting the Krypton show, which still doesn't even have Jor-El in it, so that doesn't even count. Because that's like Jor-El's father, Segel, so it's like Superman's grandpa.
His biological father. Sorry, I couldn't resist.
Okay, the point being, even what I'm about to say, the Krypton show doesn't really account for these purposes, and this is like the most we see, the most time we ever spent with Jor-El in media. Frankly, this is like like on Krypton, like the most we've ever spent like on Krypton. The days before that does not count the Krypton show. It's
you would see like Man of Steel again is about 20 minutes on Krypton, so that's probably the only thing that comes close. Maybe
22 minutes.
Right.
Just saying, it counts.
It's almost like Man of Steel kind of was influenced by this episode a little bit.
I'd like to think so. All right, so it's we see them as like a loving couple, and they have. You're right. There is banter. There's like a real tenderness and a romance and an affection there that you feel like you really like this couple.
It's also just like let's give a shout out to baby Kal-El, because I think just as a toddler, we really do get that kind of like parental affection down really well. Honestly, I like the fact that he's a toddler and not an infant. I really do think that was a smart change as well, because a lot of the times he is an infant, but with the toddler, you really do get a sense of like, this kid has a personality that these parents are attached to already at this point. I think that kind of like, it's a subtle thing, but I think it makes the emotion just a little bit more palatable.
Yeah, he's probably like a year and a half old, be my guess, something like that. But I love, and with the tenderness of the scenes here, and I think Dini and Burnett, they wrote the heck out of this. I love like the little like Jor-El after he kind of things don't go well for him at the council meeting, which we'll get into in a second. I love he's just so defeated, and he's with the kid. He says, "It must be nice not having a care in the world," and it's just this really nice.
Which very much reminded me of Fantastic Four: First Steps.
Mm-hmm.
The scene with Reed Richards and Franklin. The scene I'm
talking
about.
I know the scene you're talking about.
Yeah.
but still, it's a really nice, just kind of a. It's nice. It basically puts in perspective what he's fighting for, why he wants to save the planet. Like the fact that his son doesn't have to. As far as in that moment, where he's concerned, he doesn't know what his son's going to be up against.
Mm-hmm.
That he's going to have to actually worry and carry on the legacy, and Krypton have the responsibility thrust upon him. He thinks it's all on his shoulders. It's a really nice moment of kind of unknown connection between the father and son there.
Definitely.
So with the House of El, the wrinkle that we've never had really with Superman, we got to talk about Sullivan, the father-in-law.
I love how Tony J comes in and he has like maybe 5 minutes of screen time, and he manages to be like the most compelling character in the whole damn episode.
He was so freaking good.
I mean, that's just the power of casting Tony J, man. You cast Tony J, it doesn't matter if he has like 5 lines. He's gonna be an MVP.
When I think voice of the '90s, I do think Tony J. That is like yes. I mean, Dr. Lipschitz from Rugrats. It's like anyway. So Sullivan, I love the layer of it's Laura's father. He's on the council, so he's definitely holds a position of power there. So there's definitely always like a political, because Jor-El's like the chief scientist on the planet, so he's got a position of like respectability and kind of power there, and it's also like in conjunction with he can maybe kind of married into it, or some that's probably like make. Maybe it was like introductions made between. That's like a lot you can infer there, but you don't need. It's just the fact that his father's like on the council, and he's an upstanding kind of Kryptonian, and he's warning Jor-El. And I love that he's warning him not purely out of like the father-in-law animosity. He's warning him out of like he knows the theory will upend his reputation, his political standing, and it'll put his family through the ringer. And he's just trying to. He is old-fashioned, but he's saying all this out of concern. Very grandfatherly, very father-in-law kind of. I don't know. It just feels. I just like that he's layered, not just a mustache twirler. He's not just like no,
absolutely not. Yeah, I mean, he's not even like a stereotypical like jerk father-in-law. Like I said, he. At first glance, he might come across that, but I feel like that melts away very quickly. And again, this guy does not have a lot of screen time, but he has a lot of layers.
He has like three utterly perfect lines. He's got like we have the tremor, the temblor, like basically the planet's starting to collapse. and we have earthquakes and everything happening on Krypton, and one almost kills Kal-El, like basically like a thing almost crushes the kid, and we save him at the last second. And we have Tony J delivering this like pitch perfectly. He says, "You'd better be wrong, Jor-El," and that's not like out of like
yeah.
that's not like out of spite.
Absolutely.
That's out of like just sorrow. Like, oh, you better be
Out
wrong.
of like,
You
if
can't
if you're not wrong, then we are fucked.
Yeah. But I love that. Also, I completely forgot about this. So yeah, we have the crypto cameo in this episode.
We do, yeah.
Yeah, we have the
Very
now.
quick.
He is not going. Just I don't want to get your hopes up. Crypto will not really be in the show, so don't get too
I'm not
excited.
surprised.
But
I mean,
we have
Crypto
a really
has a whole animated series to his name. He doesn't need to be in this show.
we do have a really I don't want to spoil it. But we have a really funny crypto joke at one point during the series. I will tell you that is really fun. It's hilarious, but we'll get there.
Okay.
Supergirl, we set up Supergirl, and they did plan for her from the beginning, but there was, it'll be a while before we get to her. But there was, they set her up here. We said, Jor-El, you have an ego the size of Argos, which is the sister planet, the sister city and planet of Krypton, which is where Supergirl hails from.
Uh-huh.
Okay, so Jor-El's presentation to the council. One, I love the visual of Brainiac looming above the council, so he's there. Jor-El can't help that. Like Brainiac is there, and it's all the decision like rests on Brainiac's going to back his play here. And Krypton's hubris, as it always is, but in this case, it's all that advancement that built Brainiac. They refuse to question the computer and just admit any fault, and like maybe we did something wrong in building the computer.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And they accused Jor-El of like the hypocrisy of they accused Jor-El of refusing to to admit his own faults and everything here. That it's like even his own family just kind of accuses him of like, oh, you can't ever be wrong. Like, no, Brainiac can never be wrong, but Jor-El, you can't ever be wrong, can you? It's like, come on.
Yeah, no, I mean, Jor-El is very much put in a rock and a hard place here, for sure.
Brainiac's basically he gaslights the council that Krypton is fine. It's a polar shift. Jor-El's out of his depth, and I'm convinced this is all Dini. By the way, Dini had a really good idea here. I'm pretty sure is that I love the idea the council rejects a very logical but risky plan that Jor-El had that makes all the sense in the world. That basically we establish the Phantom Zone projector because down the line we're going to need the Phantom Zone. And how do we get the Phantom Zone? Well, we have a projector to do it, which is from the comics. So it wasn't always like the weird diamond effect, kids. Before, like the pane of glass floating in space. Sometimes
the S.
Yeah. Well, no, that Superman had that, but
yeah, I know. But didn't the cellophane S like send them into the Phantom Zone?
No. Remember, it was like that Family Guy joke. It was a weird, pointless thing.
That's what I rember.
But no, it didn't. From. Yeah, but it literally didn't do anything. That's what the joke was. So it's pointless. It just throws the cellophane S in. It's a dumb Richard Western.
Okay,
it literally does nothing.
For some reason, I thought the cellophane S like trapped them in the triangle, but
no. You're thinking of that gag where like he's fighting generals out and everything. He sends them into the Phantom Zone and Family Guy. That's what you're thinking.
That's what I'm thinking. Yeah. Anyways.
Okay. Anyway, so the point being, the plan is like use the Phantom Zone projector to put everyone on Krypton in the Phantom Zone temporarily.
Again, a very Reed Richards play.
Yeah. We're going to put everyone into the Phantom Zone. We're going to then rocket one person to a habitable planet, which basically is destined to be Earth. Earth is like the nearest habitable planet. And we'll put everyone back. But again, what sells them against the idea is like, well, it's technically our prison.
Mm-hmm.
But I love it, though. That's a very Dini idea. Of like, Dini's always thinking about the logical, like, well, we would have an option. We would have an out. It's a place that can infinite storage. We can put everyone there.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, so by the way, my headcanon, I forget it. I think there's a line later on that's going to confirm this, but regardless, I'm convinced that what made Jor-El the popular scientist that he was is that I think he built the Phantom Zone projector in the first place. I think that was his invention on Krypton. That's why he became the lead scientist. Because it was like something they put all the unruly Kryptonian criminals or just any ne'er-do-wells on the planet to.
Yeah, I could see it.
I love the subtlety where Sylvan, you see like a regret in a pause where you see him like reacting, oh, Jarrell, why did you say that? Or it's the whole thing of like he's leaving, but you see sympathy, but also like that he could have turned back and stuck up for him, but he didn't. So you have that prideful, the sin of pride on Sylvan where he didn't back his son-in-law. Like, it's kind of neat.
Mm-hmm.
Anywho, so Jor-El is kind of like in a Twilight Zone episode. Ultimately, it's kind of like a Twilight Zone episode that turns into Die Hard in space. That's kind of the best way I could summarize
Well,
what Jor-El
definitely
goes through.
Twilight Zone in the sense of like the AI is literally like turning against humanity,
Yeah.
and only one man knows it, and how can he
Mm-hmm.
fight against it?
Exactly. It's like the overwhelming odds of the Twilight Zone, where everyone he seems crazy in the world, where we, the audience, know he's not. It's like there's something on the wing. It's pretty much what Jor-El's going through.
God, right, right. A very elaborate, high concept sci-fi version of that. Yes.
Yeah, but I just love the crazy combination. But then ultimately, it kind of turns into Die Hard, where he's just trying to, he's trying to escape and just kind of get home and everything. It's kind of.
Mhm. Well, I love how the urgency just like really ramps up. Like once he confronts Brainiac, Brainiac's like, "Oh yeah, your planet's fucked in like what, like a matter of hours or minutes?"
Hours.
Hours. That's what I thought. Yeah, yeah.
Not many, though. It says Krypton has seen its last sunrise. Like, oh boy.
Like that really ramps up the stakes like pretty immediately in the episode going into the third act.
Yeah, I mean, we have like a heated argument between Jarell and Laura, and I like that it's not just like a one dimensional like kind of thing where it's like, oh, Laura's like, how could you do this to our family? She's bringing up like, look, like, obviously she loves and she trusts Jarell, but there is a realistic cost to what he's doing. Like, you're really this is going to make us look really bad, and you're kind of hurting the family and saying what you're the doom saying that you're doing right now. But I love that she did take his words to heart. She showed her father the data, and their father was then sold on it when he actually sat down and reviewed the data.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So yeah, so
Yeah, and
as
that
you
is
said,
the compelling character arc that like I said, like 3 scenes, maybe 5 minutes of screen time. It really does kind of go full circle.
so Jarell confronts Brainiac, and it's a great chilling scene where he uncovers the secret that Brainiac's been keeping. That essentially, and this is where we got to set up kind of our Brainiac kind of his modus operandi is here. So Brainiac, per his programming on Krypton, which ultimately, I guess, kind of like it kind of became, well, not just self-aware, but basically where he basically interpreted the Krypton. He was built to be a repository of Kryptonian technology to know everything that Krypton is, and essentially. When he learned that Krypton was going to be destroyed, instead of opting to save it or help the effort to basically like side with Jarell and save the plan, do an effort to save the plan, he decided to basically do like the airplane thing where it's like secure your own mask and then the people, but there's no time to save the people.
Mm-hmm.
That was kind of his logic, where he's basically downloading himself as the repository and the symbol of Krypton and Kryptonian history, and escaping Krypton's imminent destruction. And it's just brilliant that again, Brainiac, he's a link to Krypton, which is a place where conceivably this villain could originate from. He's a generational foe. He's a foe of Jor-El and Kal-El, in the future.
Which is cool for sure.
And Bruce Timm, one of the reasons Bruce Timm hesitated on this, but we kind of like we did a successful version of it. Another reason he feared doing this change with Brainiac originally was he feared it was going to be like the Joker killing Batman's parents in '89 thing. Like it's too easy, it's too convenient, it's too small a world. But
I really don't think so. I mean, I agree with the Batman '89 thing. I agree with that criticism, but I don't think this is a one-to-one comparison at all.
well, yeah, that's what I'm saying. That was the initial fear, but the way in which it was handled, Tiki, it does feel like one Brainiac doesn't actually kill the plant. He could have helped him. Again, he didn't blow up the plant. The plant was this just happened, but Brainiac covered it up. So it's not like a directly he just killed it, and it was just like, oh man, Brainiac's like the worst thing ever. He just like, Krypton built this thing. Anyway, so I think it's a successful version of that kind of like twist of like tying the villain into the backstory without him like completely overwriting the backstory, which was Batman '89's problem.
Sure, sure.
So yeah, again, all because the computer logic of I didn't want to waste time in trying to save Krypton when there's no time left to do what I wanted to save myself, basically as the symbol. He's kind of like ultimately what Superman becomes is like, the thing to carry on Krypton's legacy, but it was like it's the most selfish and cold, calculated, reasoned version of that. That's kind of what Brainiac is. He's like his own version of Superman, but just the cold legit. It's like the worst of Krypton embodied.
It's basically like the coolest version of evil Superman that we could possibly get.
But yeah, isn't that like a neat idea though? That
Yeah,
he's kind of like just as a nice reflection of Superman. We haven't even gotten Lex yet, and that's like a cool reflection of Superman. We haven't. Superman's not even in the episode yet.
Well, I mean, it's the classic idea of like the AI that like it's programmed to help protect humanity, but by protecting humanity, it does a bunch of fucked up, immoral shit.
Absolutely.
Uh-huh.
So yeah, we have our action
time in the sci-fi realm.
So we have our action mandate with Jor-El and kind of like the action movie here, where he's going on his way home to save his family because there is no time left, essentially, because they have he has.
Like I said, I think it is cool that by getting that in the third act, in a sense, we do have Jor-El as kind of like the proto Superman in a way.
Absolutely, and I love that. Mm-hmm. So let's see. So he goes there. He has his big moment. He tells Selvan to, like, for the sake of your grandson, kindly shut up. And we have the fail-safe, and this is a great idea. That the Superman origin story was basically like the last-ditch effort here, where it's like, okay, so Jor-El was smart enough to construct a prototype of the ship, probably, that basically would have fit. Again, ultimately, the plan was to fit one person anyway, so this was like the proof of concept, and he would have it just in case they said no, so we could protect his family. Where, we'll put Kal-El, we'll make sure our son lives on, we'll put him in the ship, and we'll have, like, the Phantom Zone projector and like a little kind of, basically, we have a little box that's in there with him. We'll get to this very soon, but essentially it's kind of our equivalent to the crystal, which we'll put a pin there. So he puts in like a few totems of Krypton along with the Phantom Zone projector, and I love that we acknowledged in the desperation that, Jor-El offered, like, Laura, I mean, I could make a last-minute adjustment. You could go with our son if you want, but there was a risk to it. The risk was they might not end up on Earth. That was the risk.
Right.
But she chose to die with her husband. That she put
it's
trust in.
It's also very interesting. Like I almost kind of feel like that would be an interesting what if in its own right. Of like, what if Superman arrived on Earth with a parent? Like, how would that affect how Clark Kent was raised by the Kents,
Yeah.
Like, I don't know. I think it's an interesting hypothetical, but yeah, it's a cool wrinkle to throw in.
No, you're right. It's an interesting what if, because I mean, you would have had, like, Laura would have had powers. You would have had a Superwoman who, basically would have had her child. And like, how would she?
Would have had Supermom.
You would have had Supermom, and would Supermom be as nice a person with powers on the Earth? I mean, she wouldn't be raised by anybody. It'd be like she would have.
I don't know. I kind of feel like it'd be a more.
Would it be the James Gunn thing? That's the question.
A little bit. That's kind of like maybe a less overt version of the James Gunn thing.
Yeah.
It's very interesting hypothetical that you just stumbled onto right there. Anyways.
Oh, yeah. Regardless, so she chooses to. She basically has faith in her husband. Okay, my husband has come up with, like, he's put. He had the foresight. He kept trying to warn everyone. No one listened, and I trust him with my son's life, and I want to die with the man that I love. So it was again, it's a really powerful way of doing the origin, I felt, where, we also, real quick, Sullivan has a really nice hero moment where, he is the distraction so they can send Kal-El away, and he's like, is that a problem, officers?
Right.
It's like one moment of comedy in this whole thing. it's a very sad opener if you think about it, because, we kill everyone at the end.
Yeah, it's pretty apocalyptic. Again, kids WB, everyone.
Exactly. There's brutal from the gate. We're gonna do we're gonna do really messed up stuff in Superman, by the way. Not as messed up as New Batman Adventures, but we're getting it's the building blocks. Anyway, so so it's a really Lolita Ritmana. So basically, Shirley Walker, the way it's always worked the DCAU between Batman the Animated Series and Superman the Animated Series and so on and so forth is Shirley Walker was the basically, she's like the lead composer. She kind of put together, like, her other composers that work on the episodes and do specific episodes. Like, she had the main theme and she kind of oversees it all. But Lolita Ritmanis, who eventually goes on to Justice League, when, of course, sadly, we eventually lose Shirley Walker. But Lolita Ritmanis, she did the score on this episode. And the end music of this episode is just it's so bittersweet and beautiful. Like the
Yeah,
sad,
it's for
like
sure.
yeah. So Brainiac leaves Krypton. The L's, they have the heartfelt goodbye to their son. Tony J has aside from goodbye, we love you, Cal Eller's goodbye, son. We have Tony J with like the last awesome line of the episode where everyone's like saying, "Oh man, hopefully that was the last one," and he says, "Think, oh the Tremors, like the last ones."
Yeah, for sure, for sure.
And he knows, yeah, we sealed our fate, but without like spelling it out, it's just like, yep, those were the last ones. So the planet blows up, and it's the cool when the rocket escapes. Basically, our title image here. The reason I really like this is that it's basically a cool update of the Adventures of Superman opening with George Reeves, where we see like the rocket, at the top of the episode, we see like the rocket leaving.
I honestly do not know the intro to the George Reeves stuff, but I'll take your word for it.
Yeah, I think it was like even not the intro was like the first episode when they established the first Superman episode. They showed like the origin of like Brett, like for like less than 30 seconds. You saw like, okay, Jor-El puts the
By the
baby in
way,
the rocket.
Dragon, whatever. I'm sorry to get us off track, but whatever happened to our idea of covering the I Love Lucy episode with Superman? Is that still on the table?
I mean, it's not off the table.
Yeah, I'm just saying, maybe something to look into.
Yeah.
I feel like that'd be really fun. Anyways, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Anyway, yeah. So but yeah, so this is like I always felt this kind of like a nice update of just like when we kind of visualize like the origin, like in one kind of really cool image. We put them in like this protective glass tube, and they're watching their son just kind of blast off, and they share the kiss before it all blows up. It's a really poignant image.
For sure.
So it's harrowing seeing Krypton the Shrimp. We're actually killing people, like in episode 1 of our Kids WB show. Like everyone's dying. And little detail. I love that we see Krypton. We see all the little bits of Krypton that go in the portal with them. If you really look, because when Krypton blows up, it's all green. And it's just like it's radioactive. It's become radioactive now. So anyway, so it goes through kind of like the little hyperspace path, and we end on the namesake of the episode, the last son of Krypton.
Yeah, very appropriate.
And that's it.
All right, cool. So yeah, like I said, Dragon, I definitely think like it's definitely a bold swing to start the episode, to start the whole series like this, and I think this episode does. It basically like we know all this already. We know the basics, we know the outline of the episode, but it is cool to kind of like have some details here. Like obviously, the presence of Tony J is much appreciated. I think. Like we established, this is definitely one of the more down-to-earth versions of the L family, the House of L that we've gotten in media. And the Brainiac thing is definitely an obvious highlight. So I wouldn't say this is like the most thrilling start to the series by any means. Like I don't think this is on like for example on Leather, like this is probably a better pilot than On Leather Wings is, because On Leather Wings very much just throws you into the thick of things. But I think that On Leather Wings is a bigger first impression than this, if that makes sense. That's a bigger showcase of like, this is what our series is going to be, from animation to vibe to characterization. Whereas this is it's cool backstory, it's needed backstory. I think it's going to like I'm excited to see with the Brainiac stuff in particular where that's going to go in the future. But on some level, it doesn't really leave that big of an impression. Obviously, not having the title character, and of course, I haven't seen the other two parts of this, so I only have one part of the picture. But I'm excited to see where we go. I'm excited. I assume that what's going to happen with these three parters, just as a guess here, and keep in mind, folks, the big selling point with these series is that I have not seen anything. I mean, I've seen like a select handful of Superman the Animated Series episodes that Dragon kind of picked out for me to tie into some of the Batcave stuff. But that might be like, how many would you say that was, Dragon, total? Like maybe like a half dozen at most over the course of the years.
Well, half dozen what specifically again?
Like
episodes of Superman the Animated Series you told me to check out, like in conjunction with Batcave stuff.
Yeah, that's probably well. That's the thing. Technically, with the stuff that we've covered, Superman and Anime Batcave, that's approximately. Hold on a second. That's one. Okay, we covered.
Of course, you have the actual number.
Yeah, so World's Finest Man we covered. That was like basically we covered it as the movie, so it was like
Sure.
That's technically 3 episodes in one. So that's 3. Then we have 4, minimum 5. Well, minimum.
Okay, well you get my point. My point is that
half dozen probably accurate. I showed you like a couple on the sides. Let's just say you're like less than 10.
Yeah. So it's going to be a really interesting ride. Also, to address a couple comments here, Kogias, I'm not going to touch the Snyder stuff. I mean, I agree with you, Kogias. I agree with you, but I just Zack Snyder's just exhausting to talk about. But in hindsight, I feel glad that Zod wasn't in the episode because even though I think that he's a great villain, I think he's been a bit overused in adaptations. Now, Dragon, I assume that Superman the Animated Series does have a Zod, right?
Yes and no. Well,
okay, that's interesting because I don't know why I assume so. Because I kind of feel like I said, Brainiac.
Well, you assume so. You assume so because of Donner Superman. That's why you assume so.
I assume so because Zod is like probably the second most famous villain outside of Lex. Yeah.
So. But
okay, so that's an interesting change for sure.
I don't want to tell you exactly what they do, but there's kind of a workaround for Zod that's close. It's kind of Zod and is from the comics, but it's not Zod. So we'll,
all right.
Yeah.
Okay. I think that's about it. Any final thoughts on your end, Dragon?
Yes. I mean, look, Martiga also with the old pilot kind of talker because technically the pilot's intended to be like the end of part 3, really, but it's still like.
Well, I don't know what to tell you. I'm giving my final thoughts on this first episode, so it is what it is.
Sure, I'm just saying this was like bold new territory. Like they actually decided let's broach the origin story of the hero, and like they're taking their time with it, and we're adding like layers and setup. And I think just as a pilot, I think it's a lot of setup, and it was like a bold move to like let's just do all Krypton in part 1 and just like really just kind of like flesh it out and just kind of again world building that they don't have to do that world building, but they did it anyway, and it was really cool. We barely say it. I'm not going to say we never touch on it again, but it's usually very much in passing or like as it relates to a plot. So the fact that we took the time to spend time with Jor-El and Laura, and again, I think we achieved what Bruce Timm really wanted to do here, which is like we care about what Superman lost, and I think it adds like a great little bit of context to like where Superman's kind of heroic impulses come from, and just like the Kryptonian technology, and obviously Brainiac, and there's a lot to mine from it. I think it really holds up in that regard, and I had a great time with it. And it just reminds you it sets the tone for the show. Like Superman, you don't usually see, but at the end, it's the fact like it's the world of Superman where Superman like is kind of like at its best. It's like that Grant Morrison All-Star Superman thing where we can do the Silver Age and we can do like the bigger sci-fi concepts and kind of make them cool. And doing that kind of thing in the 90s was no small feat in making it watchable as it is. And only the DCAU crew, I think, could do that. And I think episode 1 is a resounding success because of that.
All right. Cool. For sure. All right. So take us out, Dragon.
Faster than a speeding bullet, more powerful than a locomotive, able to leap tall buildings in a single bound. It's a bird, it's a plane, it's Superman. Adopted by the Kents as a baby, raised in Smallville, Superman, under the guise of Clark Kent, joins the ranks of the Daily Planet. Superman makes his debut, saving the people of Metropolis from the evil that men do.
That's a very specific line. All right. On the next visit to the Fortress of Recaps with The Last Son of Krypton, Part 2. Superman! Is there a problem, officers?